Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide today as we put on our economist hats and demystify the invisible forces that drive, well, absolutely everything. We're talking about the forces behind your daily personal decisions all the way up to the massive global news headlines you read every single morning. Think of me as your enthusiastic teacher ready to break down the complex mechanics of how the world actually works piece by piece.
Okay, before we even look at a single economic theory, I want you to do a quick mental exercise for me. Just break the fourth wall with me here for a second and mentally list your top 10 wants right now. Go ahead. Got your number one? Number two? You're probably finding that the first couple were pretty easy, right? But as you go down that list, your wants just keep expanding. In fact, if I didn't limit you to 10, would the list ever actually end? Probably not, because our desires are continually expanding, developing, and changing. Oh, right. Let's dive into this. Here is our syllabus for today's explainer. 1. The fundamental economic problem. 2. The cost of choosing. 3. Three big economic questions. And 4. Real-world economic tests. So let's kick things off with Section 1, the fundamental economic problem. To truly understand global economics, we actually have to look inward first at our own human nature. Let's start by drawing a hard line between what we need and what we want. On the left side, we have our needs, the absolute bare-bone essentials for staying alive, like food, shelter, and clothing. On the right, we have our wants. These are the things that improve our quality of life, like a TV, a car, or a trip to the cinema. A lot of times we call these luxuries. But here's the really fascinating part. Everyone has a completely different scale of preference. What is a total absolute luxury for one person might be considered an absolute essential for someone else, all based on their culture, their upbringing, and their life experiences. And you know what's wild? That scale of preference never actually stops growing, no matter who you are. For an individual on a low income, their ultimate want might be a reliable car. But for a millionaire, that want scales way up to a personal jet aircraft. The universal truth here is that for both of these people, their specific want is currently unobtainable on their current budget. Human wants are universally unlimited. There is literally always something else we desire. Which brings us to the ultimate equation of economics. We have unlimited wants, but the inputs used to produce goods and services are scarce. So, unlimited wants plus scarce resources equals the fundamental economic problem. Society simply does not have enough resources to satisfy everyone's never-ending list of wants. And because of this unavoidable friction, individuals, firms, and governments are forced to do one thing: make choices. Moving right along to Section 2, the cost of choosing. Now that we know we are fundamentally forced to choose, we need to learn how economists measure the true impact of the choices we make. I'm going to slow down our pacing for just a second here because this is a massive vocabulary term: opportunity cost. It is defined as the cost of a choice in terms of the next best alternative given up. The absolutely crucial point here is that every single choice you make has a hidden price tag attached to it. Whenever you choose one alternative, you are actively sacrificing the next best option. Let's anchor this theory in a real-world, micro-level example to make it super concrete. Imagine you have exactly $15 to spend on yourself. For option A, you can buy one video game for $15, or for option B, you can buy two paperback books for $7.50 each. You can't buy both. If you choose to buy the video game, your opportunity cost is strictly those two books you had to leave behind on the shelf. This concept shows you the real, tangible cost of your everyday choices. But hey, opportunity cost doesn't just apply to video games and books. It scales up to massive global issues. Take climate change. As the 2019 Joint Nobel Prize-winning economist Esther Duflo points out, economists actually have a lot to contribute here. Just look at these choices. Should we fly less, source locally, eat less meat? Restricting the future growth of air transport to lower greenhouse gases involves a massive opportunity cost. Every single environmental action involves a trade-off, a sacrifice of the next best alternative. Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, three big economic questions. So, how do massive governments and huge firms use a specific blueprint to deal with the scarcity we've just uncovered? Well, because of the fundamental economic problem, every single economy on Earth, no matter how large or small, has to answer three fundamental questions to allocate their scarce resources. Step 1, what to produce. Step 2, how to produce. And Step 3, for whom to produce. Let's break these down together. Now, what's really interesting about this first question, what to produce, is that because economies cannot produce absolutely everything, they are forced to choose. Do they produce lots of goods and services, like food and clothing, to improve the domestic standard of living? Or do they direct those incredibly scarce resources toward producing military equipment to improve national defense? We see the real-world evidence of this trade-off when we observe that some countries spend significantly more on their national defense than others.
All right, once they decide what to make, they have to figure out how to make it. Firms have to weigh maximum resource efficiency against a whole variety of other factors. For example, an economy could produce a lot more goods cheaply by using cheap labor, but there might be serious moral objections to that choice. Or they look to innovation to overcome environmental constraints. A really cool example of this is making better use of underground water supplies to grow potatoes and other crops right in the middle of the Sahara Desert in Egypt. And finally, the question of for whom to produce. This is the constant tug-of-war economies face between economic freedom and the desire for social fairness. On one side, governments might aim for a more equal society, redistributing wealth and income from the rich to the poor through taxation. On the flip side, some economies allow for extreme inequalities of income and wealth, which are often based upon inheritance. As impartial observers, we can see this is a very significant issue in many emerging economies, where the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. All right, final stretch. Section 4, Real-World Economic Tests. Okay, class, it's pop quiz time. Let's take this entire macroeconomic framework of scarcity, opportunity cost, and those three big questions and apply it to some fascinating real-world data. We're going to look at a case study in shifting demographics from Japan. The projections from 2019 to 2050 show that the percentage of the population aged 65 and over is increasing from 28% to an estimated 38%. At the exact same time, their total population is projected to shrink dramatically, falling from 125 million down to just 100 million. So, put your economist hat back on for a second. Based on that raw data, how will this shrinking and aging population alter Japan's answers to the three big questions? What will they produce more of? Well, probably a lot more healthcare and elder care services, and maybe fewer schools. How will they produce it? With a shrinking labor force, they might have to rely really heavily on robotics and automation. And for whom? A much larger share of the resources will inevitably be directed toward the elderly. Let's apply our critical thinking to another really stark reality. The World Health Organization has highlighted a massive real-world imbalance of scarcity and need in Africa. Look at this incredibly vivid contrast. Governments in Africa possess just 1% of the world's financial resources for healthcare, yet they bear a staggering 24% of the global burden of diseases. The resources are painfully scarce, and the needs are incredibly high. And this brilliantly illustrates that the allocation of these scarce resources varies drastically even within the continent itself. Spending by individual governments is highly unequal. High spenders like Namibia and South Africa spend 10 times more per head than countries like Kenya and Tanzania. And they spend at least 20 times more per head than lower spending nations like Ethiopia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, as impartial analysts, we have to look at the whole picture. The total funding data is actually incredibly complex. That 1% figure can be slightly misleading because massive sums are injected by outside organizations attempting to alleviate this specific scarcity. Entities like the World Bank, the private sector, and large charities like the Gates Foundation spend huge amounts on healthcare funding, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. But even with all that outside help, total funding remains inadequate for the sheer scale of the wants and needs. So I'm going to leave you with a final provocative take-home assignment. Imagine you are an economist employed by the World Health Organization. You are facing inadequate funding and practically unlimited healthcare needs. How would you obtain more funding? And maybe more importantly, how would you direct those incredibly scarce funds to give the absolute maximum benefit? Because remember, every single dollar spent in one clinic is a dollar not spent somewhere else. That is the heavy, real-world responsibility of opportunity cost. Keep thinking critically, keep questioning the choices around you, and I really hope you leave this explainer empowered to see the invisible economics shaping our world.